Welcome, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I'm an admissions consultant and the co-founder of Top MBA Consultants. And I had the pleasure some time ago of interviewing an IESE current student. And today I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to get the admissions perspective from the Deputy Director of Admissions, Tomo. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. First and foremost, thanks for having me today in this wonderful session. I'm Tomofumi Nishida, but everyone calls me Tomo. I'm Japanese, and so this virtual background is quite misleading because I'm not based in Barcelona, but based in Tokyo, Japan. But at the same time, I'm traveling so often, so I'm now preparing a long trip starting in a few days. And as Jesse already mentioned, I'm a part of the MBA admissions team. And I also graduated from the MBA program of IESE Business School in Barcelona in 2016. And 3 days after my graduation, I started to be a part of this admissions team together with the Career Development Center as well. And yeah, that's it about myself. And I'm happy to clarify anything you'd like to know from this session.
I actually didn't know that detail. You're saying that you joined the admissions team directly after graduating?
Exactly, 3 days after.
Okay. So what made you decide to go that route?
Even before starting an MBA, I wanted to find my post-MBA career either in human resources, education, or strategic consulting. And I need to make it shorter, but after doing a summer internship, I decided to focus on the first option that is related to human resources, no education. And compared to several options in this category, I found it much more attractive in terms of its international scope and the quality of people I can interact with, and together with so many other reasons, the combination of so many reasons led me to become an admission officer of IESE.
That's terrific. It's unusual to know your colleagues from so well, probably from the beginning, coming from the student perspective first, right?
Yeah.
So before we get into every stage of IESE's admission process, could you try and give us just the overview, and as well as your role, and if you are actually on the admissions committee?
Sure. In terms of the overview of the admissions process, I think everything can be covered later, so I try to make it super short. But basically, I think it's composed of 3 steps. The first one is for applicants to submit documents, and the second one is an interview. The last one is the assessment day, which is a little peculiar to IESE Business School. And I'm a core member of the admissions team, so it means I'm in quite important discussions in making key decisions of many candidates.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I wanted to ask first a question that I'm hearing constantly these days, which is what is IESE's view, and I know all schools are dealing with this, on the use of AI, such as ChatGPT, in producing the applications, as well as once they're in the program, the various ways that people are using it these days.
Sure. I think I should divide my answer into 2 parts. The first one is about the admissions process, what's going to happen during the application process. We don't have a special policy. And to be honest, I'm less interested in the process, but much more interested in the outcome. So what I wanted to say is it's more about whether something you submit is authentic or not. We can easily distinguish something that could be written by ChatGPT from anything else. So the outcome is more relevant. And when it comes to our policy in a classroom, I think we are more flexible than what we do in the admissions process, in the sense that, for example, professors are completely fine in the use of AI in many situations, not all, but in many situations. For example, perhaps professors may show you an example that was generated by ChatGPT, and then based on that, discussion can be started. I think the outcome of such a discussion can be quite intriguing, more intriguing than a discussion without ChatGPT.
Excellent. Okay, thanks so much. And starting with the kind of before you actually submit the application, could you walk us through what you believe applicants should do to lay the groundwork for a really strong application?
I think it is about yourself and the school. And when it comes to about yourself, I think it would be great if you could make an effort to know who you are, not only as a professional, but also as an individual. I don't think this process can be completed by yourself. I think you need to discuss it with so many people around you who are familiar with who you are, like your colleagues, family members, and so on. And then when it comes to the process or importance of knowing a score, at the end of the day, you don't find significant change differences in terms of what you're going to learn in each school. But at the same time, if you look at each school more closely, you can easily find so many differences, including the duration of the program, the location, and how diverse a cohort is, and etc. And then you can also make sure to connect the dots. It's not just about what just copying the statement of each institution. For example, each European business school should emphasize the value of diversity. But what does diversity mean to you? Why it's so relevant to you? So you have to connect the dots between the school and yourself. So I think this process is indispensable for everyone.
And as part of that process, as you're saying, for me, I do feel the most critical step is getting to know yourself incredibly well, and as you say, spend not just days or but weeks, months, sometimes even beyond that, right? So then, once you are very clear on kind of who you are, where you're coming from, what your goals are, and the ideas of how the particular school can help you achieve that, then I think we talked about this, that we really agree the importance of school research is incredible, and I'd love to get your point of view on that.
Sure. In addition to what I just mentioned, I think knowing one school could be less sufficient because your understanding can be deepened by understanding school B. So such a comparison could be also integral. And to that end, perhaps you can gain so much information on the website, including the recording of this session or something like that, for example. But in addition to that, I think you can make sure to get first-hand information, like what you can understand from your casual chats with some people at the institution. It's not just about someone who can be regarded as a little more official, like the admissions officer, but also alumni, students, and etc. It would be great if you could make an effort to talk with approximately at least, let's say, 5 people from each school, so that you can start understanding the differences of at least 2 different schools or even more.
Excellent. And then finding the ways, as you say, to really connect that to what you're trying to accomplish, right? This is kind of the primary way to make that decision. Will school A or school B help me the most, and will I be the most able to contribute to school A or school B? Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not just about what you're gonna do during the time at the institution, but also about future even after graduation. So you have to think about so many things. That's why so many stakeholders, including alumni, are relevant. And there are so many aspects to consider. It's not just about something superficial that could be captured by a ranking, a location, etc. So it would be great if you could have multiple criteria to judge each institution.
And regarding interacting with you and other admissions staff, I know that for many applicants, they're wary or unsure of how it's going to impact them when they're emailing or meeting you, and how much they may be judged. Are they asking a stupid question, or is something they say going to end up as part of the decision for the AdCom? So could you help enlighten applicants on the kind of do's and don'ts of how to interact with you and other admission staff?
First and foremost, I would say it's up to you whether you try to interact with admission officer before submitting your application. This is something we encourage most applicants to do, but it's still completely up to you. For example, when I was an MBA applicant in 2013 or 2014, I didn't have direct informal interviews with any admissions officer at the IESE at all, because I visited the campus even twice before once before submitting an application and once during the admissions process. So I was more convinced I got sufficient information and I didn't have a little sensitive topic to be discussed, like what to do with this test score. I was more or less convinced about what to do at what moment I should submit my application without consulting such topic with anyone else. So I didn't have any special topic to be discussed with such a person. If that's the case, you can skip this process. It's not a must, or it doesn't give you a direct advantage, to be honest. But at the same time, I would like to make sure that you're completely or you're perfectly welcome as long as you have something to discuss, regardless of the level of your application preparation. I think what matters more is if you have something to discuss and how relevant it is. For example, some topics specifically to be discussed with an admissions officer may include, let's say, why was consulting a big portion last year in the employment report published by IESE? I don't think you can get such information from the website. Perhaps students may find it difficult to answer, but I can answer this question. Or another question is whether I should apply in round 2 or round 3 with this score, looking at the current situation of every applicant you can find, and etc. So I'm happy to address such questions, but if you don't come up with any questions, you can go to a different direction. I still encourage you to interact with some people at the IESE. It doesn't have to be an admissions officer at all, but if you like me to put you in contact with someone at the IESE, this is also something I can happily help you do.
Excellent. All right, so now I wanted to transition just to confirm to everyone listening. Today, we're really trying to drill down and deep dive as much as we can, get beyond the really superficial. So we're going to jump into talking about IESE's essays. And Tomo's actually prepared a kind of example that we're going to go through to give you some like good and bad. So why don't we transition to that, and let me have you introduce the actual essay questions, Tomo.
Sure. Should I start sharing my screen, or perhaps this is something you can do?
If you want, yeah, I'll go ahead and put that on screen. So yeah, now you've got that for the first essay.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, so go ahead and take it away.
Yes. So first of all, I would like to confirm that this is completely a fake essay. It has nothing to do with an application I've ever seen. I created this with the help of ChatGPT, but at the same time, it didn't take more than 7 minutes for me to complete it. And this is a career goals essay. The question last year was, what are your short-term and mid-term post-MBA goals, and how will the IESE MBA program help you achieve such an objective, and up to 300 words. Although I'm aware this session is recorded, it would be great if you could take some time to read through these sentences in this essay.
Yeah, that's going to be useful. So I encourage people to pause here and take some time and go ahead and read through this. So as Tomo is analyzing it, you can very clearly understand his points. So go ahead and pause it. And now we'll assume you've come back, and go ahead and take it away, Tomo.
Yeah.
Good point, definitely.
So assuming that people finish reading this essay, let me start commenting on anything captured in this essay. What's your impression on this? For me, it's not bad, but it could have been better. This is my summary of my impression, I would say. Where to start? So let me start from something that came to my mind in the first place. So there are 4 paragraphs, as you can tell, and I'm not sure if the first paragraph is necessary. it's about the origin of this applicant, born and raised in Mumbai, and then moving to Dubai when this applicant was 24, etc. But it has nothing to do with this person's short-term or mid-term career goal. And you have only 300 words. So it depends on how many words you may need to address these points, short-term and mid-term career goals, and how will the IESE MBA program help you achieve them. But what is clear is what is more important is to clarify these 3 points: your short-term goal, your mid-term goal, and how IESE could help you achieve them. And well, apparently less than 20 or 25% of the space is dedicated to the third part, how IESE could help you achieve this objective. So perhaps cutting the first paragraph could be already an option you can start considering. And one thing I like about this essay is how specific this essay is. For example, if you look at the part about the short-term goal, it's so specific about what this person would like to know. Whenever you try to think about what to do with career, it's always good for you to understand that there are 3 components in career. They're about location, industry, and function. In the case of consulting, practically speaking, sector and function should be the same. It's all about consulting, but this person clarified the sector, the function, in addition to location, which is Dubai, and also a company this person would like to work for is also raised as an example, BCG. This is also excellent. And also, if you look at the last paragraph, you can find the name of one of the alumni this person interacted with before completing an application, Ahmed Ali, MBA class of 2024, just as an example. But at the same time, as long as you try to be specific, it would be great if you can consider how relevant it is. For example, in the last paragraph, you can find some description about the IESE's flagship course, such as executive simulation. And to be honest, I'm not sure how relevant it is, because I understand what kind of course it is, and apparently it's a little difficult for me to understand the connection between this specific course with this short-term goal to become a consultant and the mid-term goal to become an entrepreneur. So perhaps this is because of the lack of space. It's completely fine. If that's the case, we just make sure to understand the connection in interview conversation, which is also another takeaway for you. You may find it a little too small in terms of space, but it's completely fine. If something is less clear, we try to make sure to understand it from an interview conversation. And yeah, I think that's it from my side as general advice to this fake one.
Okay, that's great. That's great. So you were talking about that leadership example as mentioning that and saying that part of the program maybe wasn't ideal for an example with their goals. What if they had been talking about something like consulting club? So they're saying, now this is my short-term goal is to transition to consulting. So this is one of the things I'm really interested in. I've already spoken to the current president of that club. And then also something very, very specific to entrepreneurship. Would that have made a lot more sense to you?
Yeah, at least if I try to compare what you mentioned to what I saw in the fake essay, definitely what you mentioned should make more sense.
And how do you feel? We're looking at the one essay, and why don't you? We're going to talk about the essays kind of as a package, but just so everyone understands, could you explain the second essay? It's just 2 essays with essay compared to some schools with 3, 4, 5, 6, right?
Yeah, exactly. We still discuss what to do with the application for the 2025 intake. So everything what I mentioned about the next year is subject to change. But essentially, we try to make sure to keep the same structure by changing a bit of things, but it doesn't make a huge difference. So this career goals essay is mandatory, and then there's an optional essay, which is completely up to you whether you work on it or not. But this is an opportunity for you to showcase something less captured in other components of your application. So whether you work on it should be decided after you complete other components of an application in theory. And whoever is interested in a scholarship is also supposed to work on the scholarship essay at the same time when they submit an application. I think that's it, except for video essays we're going to talk about later on.
Okay, and just I understand this may change, but from last year, so people have an idea of what that second question was. It was what would you like to highlight about yourself or your journey, which may not have been captured in your application. I've got that right, Tomo, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, all right, excellent. So the next thing we were going to talk about is looking at the application as a package, right? So the goals essay doesn't stand alone. You have all of the components of the written application, and then, as you say, we're going to get to the video assessment as another component. So stepping back as the applicant, what do you think is the best way for them to kind of think of it from a bird's eye view and make decisions on, if they're going to write this optional essay, what should they focus on, and how should that kind of guiding force dictate what they put in their CV or these kind of things?
Everyone's situation under such a circumstance should be significantly different from each other. So it's a little difficult to mention something quite general. But what I can say as an encouragement is, even if one aspect of an application is less impressive, you shouldn't give up because of that at all. Instead, what you should make sure to do is to reinforce your application by working hard on other components of an application, because of the holistic approach our admissions committee makes sure to keep all the time. But at the same time, it also depends on how extreme this weaker part is as well. So it depends.
So if I always find that when applicants really do a thorough self-analysis, they do often find this kind of life thread or theme that sometimes goes all the way back to childhood. So if they're able to identify a kind of life theme that connects with the past, the MBA program itself, and then their goals, is that one good angle for them to try and kind of organize the overall application?
I would say it's not a must, but still a nice to have, as long as this is relevant to a question. I think what is more important is whether it's relevant to a question. For example, in the question I just showed you about career, it's a little difficult to show such a topic because of the limited space, because of the limited relevance, and etc. So I'm not sure if this is a good idea to mention it in this specific essay question, but perhaps taking advantage of the optional essay where you can mention whatever you want, you can show such an aspect that could be also, in a way, closer to an aspect that we can learn from what we can find in the career goals essay as well. So it's not a must, but it's a nice to have as long as it's relevant.
Okay. Now here's a question that I think is really tough for applicants. Sometimes applicants are very, very clear on their career goals. They have, a absolute short-term, mid-term, long-term plan, but there are lots of other times when they really aren't sure, and this is part of the reason they want to do an MBA, right? They're thinking, they're coming from finance, and maybe they want to go into consulting. Maybe they want to have, launch their own startup. So they want to use the program to learn and solidify the direction they want to go. So this means in their goal essay, it can be extremely vague or difficult to work with. So how do you feel about that when you get a very kind of unsure plan, and what kind of advice would you give applicants if that's their situation?
In short, I would say something hypothetical should be acceptable, not okay. And not everyone is confident in what he or she wants to do after graduation as of application, which we completely understand. And also, especially because I'm also a part of Career Development Center, I understand not everyone is confident in what they would like to do after graduation from that standpoint as well. And but technically speaking, again, looking back the career goals essay, you have only 300 words as a space. So perhaps it's quite challenging to showcase two different possibilities. For example, the possibility of becoming a consultant, the possibility of doing anything related to fintech after graduation in the short term. And it's quite challenging to mention these two in the same career goals essay, or I would already be inclined to say it's unrealistic. So you should choose one of them, which makes you more excited, even as a hypothetical idea. I think this makes more sense. And then to make sure that there's a consistency between what you mentioned in the short-term goal and how IESE could help you achieve this goal, you should also do some research about what kind of resources and opportunities available for you to, for example, become a consultant or to put yourself in the fintech sector after graduation, I think.
Yeah, I think that's very, very helpful. And coming back to the overall application, right? So of course you have the essays, but then there are lots of other areas in the actual online form. And one that I think is noteworthy and is useful in making some decisions on what you're actually going to include in the written essays is a section for basically checkboxes, right? Where you can say, from this list of IESE clubs, are which ones might you be interested in joining? And then there's another area where you're looking at the interactions that they have had with the school. And I noticed that there's only, you have like current student, alumni, admissions staff. Have you attended any of the events, right? And then you have a box for, open day, the very specific. So if you have an applicant who has followed our advice and has done, a ton of school research, meaning they should have talked to people from all of those categories, they likely have gone to, most or all of those events. So the application comes in with, basically all of those boxes checked, compared to someone who, only went to one information session, talked to, just one alumni. How strong a difference in impression do you get when you are evaluating those?
I think it's about the balance between quantity and the quality of your interactions with people around the essay. I'm inclined to say quality could be a little more relevant. And so even from one single conversation with one of the people at the essay, as long as you can gain so much understanding that should be associated with a specific story of this applicant, this could be already a kind of powerful tool to reinforce the application. But perhaps another applicant may find it difficult to craft an idea even after talking with 20 people. And then an episode generated by this applicant can be less impressive. So we don't try to be too judgmental just by checking the number of interactions with people at the essay, which is also applied to the number of events you're going to attend. Well, indeed, for example, it doesn't matter whether it's an event or your spontaneous interaction with someone at the essay by reaching out to a student or alumni on LinkedIn. The way to make it happen doesn't matter so much. At the end of the day, what you understand from such interactions that could be also understood perhaps in an interview, for example, could be more relevant to us, I think.
And do you think I think the only other areas they could really weave that into the written application, would be in the maybe optional essay and partially in the goals essay. And would you say it's possibly also useful when you get to the video assessment? We're going to talk about that in more detail a bit later. But if in part of their answers they happen to be able to say, actually, I spoke to this alumni who, and as long as it's directly connected to the question they're asked, but is that a situation where you end up really impressed? You say, oh, wow, they've done this. And on top of that, on the fly, they were able to, connect this. So from your perspective, is that another way they can weave it into the application, and any other ways that you see?
Yeah, as long as this is relevant to the question you may find
Right.
in video essays.
Don't force it, right?
Yes, an optional essay is different because you can write down whatever you want, but I don't know what kind of impression we may find we have by finding the names of 20 alumni without any further descriptions.
No, that would be terrible, right? No, really more important is the specific things you learned from them, right? And how it
Exactly.
relates to your personal story. Yeah, a long list just of names with no information is not going to look very good, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to talk sometimes about non-native English-speaking applicants as well. I mean, I know with IESE and many of the European schools, you're incredibly diverse internationally. What was the statistic this year as far as, is it like only, it was like 88% from other countries as opposed to Spain? Or a little bit different than I can't remember exactly.
Approximately around 85. I need to double check, but more or less.
Yeah, just to give an idea. So, that's incredibly diverse. And so you have many students coming from non-native English-speaking countries. And although they may have reached an advanced level, I know from my own experience, even when they get to school, they often struggle for the first, 3 to 6 months, just trying to really keep up with their listening, be able to follow the case study. It can be really fast paced, right? So in the written components, if they were, and I know in many cases, if they actually gave you exactly the way they wrote it without, careful polishing and using other tools to, perfect it, there would generally be some grammatical errors. There would be some possibly, spelling mistakes. At this point, is that something that you encourage them to leave because it will match their actual ability that you will see when they're, communicating with you in email, when they're in the video assessment? So, is there too much of a disconnect if they do polish it and try and make sure that there's no errors, and it in reality, it appears a little bit above their actual English level?
Well, you may find my answer a little less direct, but I would like to mention that the credibility of whatever is written is now completely changed because of AI like ChatGPT. So I don't try to judge anything from what I can find in written, and then this can be also applied to multiple contexts. In addition, I think at IESE, specifically at IESE, verbal communications matters a lot because of the emphasis on the case method, where ongoing or live interactions should be critical. And yes, also we would like to know who you are from a real conversation, which could be highlighted in one of our interview, again, about which I'm gonna speak later on. So we tend to put a little more emphasis on what we can find, hoping that such things can be a little more authentic. So yes, it's always recommended that whatever you write down is grammatically correct. This is essential, no matter whether you use ChatGPT or not. But at the same time, even if something is perfect in terms of grammar, I don't try to be impressed, to be honest, just because of that.
Okay. Yes, this is the big shift that every school is dealing with. And as far as evaluating applications, are there any differences in the way that you view applications from non-native speaking applicants, or as opposed to native English speakers?
Yeah, definitely we make sure to adapt to different standards of English communication skills, no matter whether it's written or it's oral communication. And definitely we should consider this. This is one of the critical steps for us to make sure to have rich cohort in terms of diversity. So if we try to have the same standard across all the countries, it would be quite difficult for us to keep the diversity we are embracing. So we definitely pay attention to such an aspect. I hope this is encouraging for someone who is less confident in English communication skills.
Excellent. And so with that, let's transition to the resumes. And we're not going to spend a lot of time here, but we wanted to hear from you, from your perspective, what makes a resume really stand out to the admissions committee? And are there specific elements or formats that you find particularly effective?
Yes, so let me divide my answer into two parts. The first one is a little more about content, and the second one is about the format. And as for content, I would say it would be great if you could make it as personalized as possible or as specific as possible. And then this means you might want to highlight your specific actions, responsibilities, and accomplishments by effectively using some numbers, especially for accomplishments. And then when it comes to a format, we would prefer something captured in one page. We still allow a two-page CV, but ideally it would be great if you can put everything into a one-page CV, no matter how long your professional career so far has been. And then, technically speaking, approximately, for example, 70% to 75% of the space in this one-page CV can be dedicated to your professional experiences, and 20% can be associated with your academic experiences, and 10% can be anything else, like the other additional information, including volunteer experiences and languages you're fluent in, etc.
So regarding the one-page versus two-page issue, if and when you do receive applications with two-page and they are packed and it's really 2 pages filled, right? Does that negatively impact your, is that one small mark against them in the evaluation, perhaps?
Well, at the end of the day, it's not that critical, but the reason why I mentioned this is once every applicant joins IESE, everyone is asked to follow the same format under the instruction of Career Development Center, and then where one page is also one of the requirements. That's why it would be great if they can also start following this structure, but it's not a must.
Okay, excellent. So moving on to letters of recommendation, to begin with in the evaluation, how critical are letters of recommendation in the evaluation process?
It's a little difficult to quantify the impact, but I would say the consistency between the letter of recommendation and other components of the application done by this applicant can be something we try to pay attention to. And also, we may come up with a question for interview from what is written on a letter of recommendation. So still, I can point out some relevance between the letter of recommendation to other components of an application, including an interview.
And this is a tough issue as far as the applicant and the recommender and how to, in an ethical manner, produce the strongest recommendation. So what are the ways that you feel are best for applicants to engage with their recommender, and what are some of like the do's and don'ts?
I think in general, it would be great if an applicant can give the recommender ample time to work on the letter of recommendation, but also it's not just about such ample time, but also about making sure to align with this recommender in terms of the objective of pursuing an MBA. So definitely it would be encouraged or recommended for this applicant to make a in-person or online chat for example, 30 minutes to align with each other about what is captured in the letter of recommendation. And when it comes to something that is not recommended or less encouraged, I would say, for example, it would be great if you could avoid any overlap between what is mentioned in the letter of recommendation and what is also captured in other components of an application. We don't want to find an overlap of the same episode in two different components of an application. That's why the alignment is relevant, as I mentioned. And the other thing is, well, it's a little stupid as advice, but you need to make sure to avoid ghostwriting the letter recommendation on behalf of the recommender, it should be written by this recommender, no matter how what kind of level this person is in terms of English communication skills. And if this person has a critical concern in English, well, we also accept letters in Spanish, but the English of Spanish, I think this person can consider using the translation service that could be covered by a third party. This could be something we can recommend as a general idea. On the flip side, ghostwriting a letter recommendation is not something we can recommend at all.
It's an interesting point that you just brought up of not having overlap. And of course, as you said, you're trying to make they're not ghostwriting it. And maybe they're having these discussions with the recommender, and they're talking about the various stories that from their career. So there's the possibility that the recommender could choose without the applicant knowing in this situation, right? That they're writing about this story, and the applicant writes about the same story. So would you say then they need to give the advice to them, say, I'm writing about this, so write about anything you want, but please don't write about this story? Is that a good approach to avoid that issue?
I have a bit of mixed feelings, but intentionally say, I would say, yes, it's something I can still recommend. But at the same time, such an overlap is not a red flag, I would say. Even if such an overlap is found, as long as the letter recommendation is something written by someone else, I think we can find some difference in the way of expressions and etc. This may also make us realize something intriguing. So this is also a possibility. So it also depends.
I imagine also there's frequently a situation where you have someone whose recommender is their current boss. They've worked with them, let's say, for the last 2 years, and maybe there's been one big project that whole time, right? So the overall story might very naturally be the same. And so in that case, you would hope that they can bring a really strong kind of outside perspective on what, while the applicant is writing about their own perspective on that. Would that also end up quite strong in the end?
Yeah, maybe. Well, at the end of the day, it depends on how large this project is. As long as project is so large, there are multiple aspects to be covered. Aspect A can be covered by an applicant, him or herself, and then aspect B of this project can be covered by a recommender, which is something I can consider as a possibility, of course.
Mm-hmm. So you still could coordinate in the same way to try and make sure that they're not covering the same aspect. Okay.
Yeah, and also I think it also depends on how long the experience of this professional is, no? Because if this person has only 3 years of work experience, which is almost the shortest, it's not easy to come up with so many episodes. So perhaps overlap can be more likely found in such an applicant than someone who has more than 10 years of work experience. So this also matters as well, I think.
There's kind of a I think dirty secret in the business school world that unfortunately many people do choose to ghostwrite their LORs, and this is generally because they go to the recommender. Recommender says, yes, I'd be thrilled to support you, but I'm really busy, so you write it and give it to me, give me a draft, and then I'll submit it. So as you're saying, this is strictly banned, right?
Yeah. So from an official standpoint, this is not something I can recommend at all.
And so how do you advise applicants to overcome that avoidance of doing the work themselves from the recommender? Do you have any tips for them of how they can break through and say, no, I need you to write this?
I'm less creative in addressing this point, but going back to the initial point, I will encourage everyone to give the recommender ample time so that this recommender may find it difficult to find an excuse to delegate it to an applicant.
Yeah, I agree, and I from my experience with this, I do see this situation with my clients frequently, and even before they speak to the recommenders, I do always try and prepare them for this very likely situation. And one of the ways is to, from the beginning, be saying to them, or when they say that to you, saying it will be so much more valuable, and I really would love to also hear your unbiased point of view on me and the work that I've done. But as you're saying, preparing them very well, having deep discussions about what you've done, possibly even kind of preparing a packet of information about the current CV, and then maybe outlines of the major projects or stories that you've had together. That makes it at least easy for them to start recalling everything, right? And much easier to make it easy for them. It's more likely you can convince them to write it themselves. Does that strategy make sense to you, Tomo?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Nothing to add to what you
Okay.
mentioned, to be honest.
All right, great. Well, that's one. Just to give applicants, that's one strategy that you can definitely use. So why don't we move on to the video assessments, which are quite a recent addition. So could you introduce the format to start with?
Yeah, of course. I know how scary it is, especially for someone who is less confident in English communication skills. When I was an applicant, I was fortunate enough to avoid it. So I wish you the best of luck with future applicants. But this is something you have to address because of the impact of ChatGPT. Well, something written is not as credible as it used to be. So this is the reason why I introduced video essays last year. But anyway, when it comes to the format, and you are supposed to work on video essays as soon as you submit as a component of your application. And the link to work on this video essay should be valid for 48 hours after you receive it. And we hope to find the outcome of your video essays also by an application deadline. It's not a must because it's less applied to people from, for example, my home country who try to start much earlier, which is not applied to some other countries, which I'm thinking about some applicants who start working on application 1 day or 2 days before the application deadline. For such a person, it doesn't make so much sense for us to ask for the punctuality, including the video essays. So we can be flexible about how punctual the video essays should be for an application deadline. But anyway, what you're supposed to do in video essays are, the first one is nothing special, just to make sure how to pronounce your name. This is also beneficial for a professor who has to lead case-based discussion in the future. And then after that, you're supposed to introduce yourself. And after that, you find several randomized questions, and 2 randomized questions most likely for the 2025 intake. Last year it was 1, but we decided to increase from 1 to 2. Unless there's a last minute change, we would like to go ahead with these 2 randomized questions. So except for how to pronounce your name, in total there are 3 questions. For each of these 3 questions, you're going to be given 60 seconds to prepare, and then also 90 seconds to showcase an answer to each question. The chance to record it is only once. This is how it works.
And I believe this is actually the first time that it's been announced that there is a 90% chance that there's going to be a second randomized question added to the assessment. Is that right?
Yes, this is the very first time.
I'm excited. I get to break news. I feel like a real journalist for a moment. I would then like to get into how then are the video assessments evaluated, and are there specific qualities you're looking for in these videos?
I would say communication skills and the authenticity of an answer. Communication skills can be also divided into a language skill, purely language skill, and something else. Something else implies, for example, how to structure an answer. It has nothing to do with your English communication skills. And then the authenticity of an answer means your answer is expected to be something that cannot be covered by ChatGPT. We make sure to have the list of questions that are not addressed by ChatGPT in the preparation stage. So it's less meaningful for you to have ChatGPT right next to you, to be honest. But still, the authenticity of an answer should be something we look for. And we completely understand it's not a natural conversation, because in a natural conversation, you are not given a condition about how much time you have to keep talking, etc. Keep talking for 90 seconds without a person in front of you is a little weird. In a way, it's a little similar to what is expected in TOEFL or something like that. But we completely understand how unnatural the thing you're supposed to do. So you shouldn't be trying to be too perfect. It's completely fine to be a little less natural. But well, I hope to find something authentic at an acceptable level in terms of English communication skills.
It's interesting you brought up having ChatGPT like beside you, right? And I can imagine that is actually happening. I think it would make you really awkward. But I do know some applicants want to like put some Post-its around, their laptops with reminders of certain stories and, this how they want to structure those stories. And if they do that, I know from experience, and I advise them not to do this for this reason. You can very clearly see their eyes are, looking off here and there, and you can see they're even reading sometimes. So do you really take note of that? And does that really kind of degrade your evaluation of that video?
The short answer is yes, it is. And the risk of doing this is even bigger than doing the same in an interview, because anything done in an interview is visible only to an interviewer, but the video essays are visible to every member in the admissions committee, including myself. So you should seriously consider how big the risk you try to take by doing so. But it depends on the level of the action. For example, perhaps without, in order for you not to miss any critical points, it could be an idea for you to take a look at such a cheat sheet once per 10 seconds or 50 seconds, just not to miss any critical items. I think this could be, at least from my perspective, acceptable. But I've found some horrible examples of people who read the script for 80 or 90 seconds.
Wow.
No matter how structured the speech is, I was not able to have the positive impression at all on the outcome of video essays.
That was one of my upcoming questions of, do you have any good or bad answers you really remember? So in this case, for the entire time, you could just see their eyes going back and forth, reading. And so that's one bad example. How about, are there any really standout videos you maybe even remember today?
For example, it can be also applied to interview, but something easy to follow. And perhaps the first thing done in this 90-second period is the summary of this episode or an answer or keyword that could be related to the following episode. And then following this keyword, this applicant can mention something as a real episode to support that summary or keyword. And this is easy to follow. And again, nothing so entertaining, but again, I would like to emphasize the importance of the authenticity of an answer based on a real episode of this specific applicant. And so I think some good examples I can come up with incorporated these two aspects.
And non-native, as with everything we're talking about, we're coming to the non-natives experience on the video assessments. I know there are occasionally times when the applicant misunderstands the question. They listen, they think they have it, and they actually answer incorrectly. sometimes you can see how it dovetailed from how they misheard it. So when that happens, let's say they still gave a good story, right? The answer they gave to the question they thought they had heard was well structured. It was authentic. Can that still save them, or because they really answered the wrong question, it wasn't the question asked, it's doomsday? Or
it completely depends on how attractive this applicant is in other components of an application. And also we make sure to double check what kind of communication skills this person has in an interview. So depending on what we find in an interview, this impression can be changed or not. So it depends.
Okay, excellent. So I think that's a great time to transition to the live interviews. Can you describe the typical structure of an IESE interview? And you actually are an interviewer yourself as well. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. So
Yes.
any applicants
So
out there, you could be face to face with Tomo at some point, right?
maybe. So let me start explaining how it works. And the duration of an interview is always more or less 1 hour. It can be a little longer than some of the business schools, which ask for 50 minutes or 30 minutes. We make sure to have enough time to know who you are from different perspectives. So that's why we make sure to make it 1 hour. And it could be either online or in person. It completely depends on your circumstance and our circumstance. So it doesn't make a difference in terms of the final evaluation at all. And you can be interviewed by one of the admissions committee members, including myself, or one of the alumni. But the one thing I wanted to highlight about these alumni is there's a rigorous process inside the admissions committee to handpick the excellent alumni. So I hope you don't find anyone that may give you negative impression. We make sure to have the excellent alumni only in this critical process in your professional or personal life. And when it comes to one of the admissions committee members, I take care of several countries, many countries in Asia. And as long as this applicant is from my region, and as long as I have interaction with this applicant, one-to-one interaction in advance before receiving an application, I don't think I'll be your interviewer. Instead, I'm going to make sure to count on my colleagues, one of my colleagues, or one of the alumni.
So just for confirmation, are the interviews blind, or has the interviewer read the complete application?
It's not a blind interview at all. No matter who your interviewer is, every interviewer has a full information. This includes your work on video essays as well.
Excellent. And applicants starting to talk about the actual interviews and the way that you and the interviewee are speaking. Preparing for answering questions, I know that applicants typically have long lists of interview questions and then try and prepare as much as they can. And they generally have like complete answers ready to deliver. And in the reality, I know it's often much more conversational than they expect. So can you give some thoughts and advice on kind of the style and structure in general for their answers?
Yeah, in line with what you just mentioned, an applicant can expect something more conversational at the IESE than at other institutions. In most cases, I would say. And perhaps you can imagine this is like a casual chat with your boyfriend or girlfriend. It's not like a complete casual chat at all, but this is a good example. And then if you kept speaking about whatever you like your partner to be aware of, your partner might find it so boring. So the same story can be applied to interview during the admissions process at the IESE. And the other thing is, well, again, just because of the nature of such a conversation, it would be great if each of your answers can be concise, not too long, not too short, going to the point. This is something I can recommend.
So as applicants begin answering, how often do you find yourself interrupting, and trying to give them a follow-up before they've given their complete answer, even if their answer is going to be relatively concise? Let's say it's going to be like 30 seconds, 45 seconds. Will you often still interrupt, or you let them complete?
I'm such a reserved Asian person, so I'm so hesitant to interrupt another person talking. But in case it's extremely long, like more than 4 minutes, 5 minutes, etc., I may consider interrupting whatever this person speaks about. But otherwise, I don't try to interrupt this person. And perhaps I may give an advice at the end of this speech to make sure that this person can make the following answers a little more concise. It depends on what kind of personality this person has. If this advice makes this person more nervous, I may consider avoiding doing so. So it depends. But yes, I usually don't try to intervene so much.
And am I correct that it becomes, they might get their first full answer out, but then after they finish, will you find that you ask follow-up questions, and kind of from that point, it goes off the easy, I'm going to ask a list of questions, your follow-up, they say something, follow-up, and you're guiding it in that way, but not necessarily directly asking all of the questions they're expecting?
And just to manage your expectations, whatever I mentioned about what kind of interview structure we're going to prefer can be mostly applied about myself. I'm not sure what's going to happen to other interviewers, but in my case, I prefer something so conversational. So I try to come up with a follow-up question based on what is just mentioned. So only when I don't come up with anything special, I may try to change the topic. Only when I need to consider the remaining time, I skip the follow-up question, etc. But in many cases, I don't prepare a list of questions, except for some things so specific I shouldn't forget, including how to finance your MBA, etc. This is out of natural conversations. That's why it makes more sense for me to prepare in advance as a question. But for other questions, I don't prepare a list of questions. Instead, I make sure to pay special attention to the details of a speech made by an applicant to come up with a new question based on that.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. I think many applicants have the misconception that, and as you're saying, it's highly subjective. I know there are plenty of interviewers, especially from other schools, who will have a list, and they will just ask a question, you answer, ask a question, you answer. But yes, I think the more conversational style is much more common. So now I wanted to get into, we wanted to talk about some very specific questions that could be asked, and talk a little bit about how they might answer these quite common questions. Again, this is very subjective. Not every school would ask these, but I wanted to get your insight. So the first one is the typical "tell me about yourself" or "walk me through your resume," which starts so many interviews. And there's many different ways an applicant can approach this, different formats. So what are your thoughts on the kind of best way to, and best length for that type of answer, best way to structure and best length?
Yeah, the idea of this question is more associated with our intention to make an interviewee feel comfortable. So I don't expect to get new information from this specific question so much, which is also applied to the video essay one, introduce yourself. So the idea to keep this question, which was a little controversial in the process of what to do with the new structure for the following intake, we decided to keep it just to make sure to make applicants feel comfortable. This is an honest conversation we had, but the same applied to this question. So this is also a good reminder of what kind of person this applicant is. But then I don't think I try to get something new. So in that sense, I don't expect something so long, more than 1 minute. So I may ask this applicant to make it concise, less than, for example, 60 seconds or 45 seconds, so that we can move on to the next stage of a conversation.
Okay, excellent. And how about a question, a typical behavioral question like describe a time when you led a team? What's your advice to applicants on how to approach a behavioral question like that?
Yes, it's not a single answer. There are multiple ways to address such a behavioral question. But I don't know if an applicant looking at this video is familiar with the STAR structure. The STAR structure is about covering situation, task, action, and result. So it would be great if you could cover these points, these 4 points in your answer to a behavioral question by putting a bit more emphasis on what exactly you did in terms of an action. Action could be a little more relevant than situation, for example. So something following this structure is easy to understand, but it's not a must for you to use this structure.
And how about a question that is still kind of behavioral, but it's much more point blank, much more direct, like how do you handle conflict within a team? Whether it's very vague, describe a time when you led a team, but this is looking for a very specific kind of answer. Would you give any different advice for dealing with a question like that? Or do you think
Yes
STAR
and
is
no.
still just the way to go?
Yeah, let me clarify what I try to say. So yes and no means for the no part, I would say it's the same as the previous one. Following the STAR structure is still something I can recommend as one of the possibilities. But when it comes to yes, I think just because this is a little more specific than the other one we just discussed, and it's about conflict, it will be, well, we try to make sure to understand whether it's truly about a conflict or not. Because some applicants prepare some episodes and perhaps none of them can be associated with a conflict. And then this applicant may think about finishing this episode without considering whether it is truly about a conflict or not. And then if that's the case, the relevance, whether this is relevant to a conflict or not, makes a difference in terms of evaluation to this specific answer.
I think that's an important piece of advice that applicants do sometimes have their stories and they try and force them into a question, even though it's not really answering that question, right? Listen to the question and
Exactly.
answer the question that you are being asked, right?
Yeah.
One more, well, two more questions we'll look at. This is another question that I know applicants often fear, which is very common. What is your greatest weakness? What's your advice to applicants on dealing with that?
It's a little similar to what I just mentioned, whether you truly go to the point, whether it's truly about a weakness. For example, I completely understand the feelings of some applicants who are inclined to talk about, let's say, how perfect I am as a perfectionist. But being a perfectionist may depend in terms of whether it's positive or negative. Again, this is something related to weakness. So as long as this is an essence of a question, your story has to be still associated with weakness, even if you try to talk about how perfectionist you are. So I think the relevance should be still a keyword even to this question.
Yeah, you hit my pet peeve. I've even made a video complaining about how much I hate applicants trying to turn a weakness into a strength, right? Not be authentic, and perfectionist is the absolute worst one, right? Although I do recognize for a small group of people, it is an honest, authentic weakness, but I would still advise them to see if you agree to pick something else because it will still register with most interviewers as artificial.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Last question is another one that people are nervous about, being asked which other schools did you apply to? This they don't know. Sometimes I think one main issue is sometimes applicants have applied to their dream schools, IESE, being a top global school, and they may have also applied to some kind of fallbacks, and they wonder, should they not mention those because it sounds like they're not so confident, or it's not a good comparison, or they worry if they're saying, oh, Harvard, that they might be implying that ESE, you might, in their mind, might be a second choice, or so what's your advice on the best way to manage that question?
It's a little complicated topic. Well, I would say, as a general and a little boring comment, I would say your transparency would be appreciated as long as you feel comfortable with this question. But at the same time, it also depends on the personality of this applicant. I may also change the style of asking this question depending on what kind of personality this applicant has after understanding this part. But at the same time, for example, let's think about someone sponsored by a company. I never try to trust that this person applies to only one business school, because this person is supposed to get to at least one school. Otherwise, I don't know what's going to happen to the professional career of this person in the same company. So it depends also on such a status of this person, applicant.
So if they genuinely are, let's say they're even they're sponsored or they're not sponsored, if they are genuinely only applying to one school, in this case being IESE, because it truly is their dream school, can they convince you? Because I have had applicants certainly that they only want to go to this school, and so they only apply truthfully first, and if they don't, then they will apply to other schools. But if they just kind of put it to you that way, will you believe that it's honest? Or will you still doubt them that they have applied to other schools?
It depends. It depends on the interactions this person has had even before submitting an application to IESE. It depends on the personality of this person. Sometimes I can be accurate about my forecast, but in other cases, even after accumulating so much experience, I still make some mistakes. So it depends. It's also a little difficult for us to be accurate about our forecast.
All right, excellent. With that, well, why don't we move on to talking about assessment day. So could you introduce the concept for anyone that's not familiar, and then walk us through what a typical agenda for the whole day would be?
Sure. In a word, it's all about teamwork or class participation, where your communication skills are part of which can be less captured in a one-to-one conversation from an interview, can be captured. So when it comes to the location or format, it could be either in person or virtual. In-person locations include Barcelona, New York, Sao Paulo, basically all of the places I mentioned have our campuses. And there's always an option of virtual participation. This choice between in-person participation and a virtual participation doesn't make any difference in terms of the final evaluation. And then we usually try to give you these two options so you can flexibly choose whichever you feel more comfortable with. Whether we use a case in an assessment day depends on several factors, but mostly on the availability of a faculty member. And because as long as we can use a faculty member, I think the assessment day with a case makes so much sense. But in some cases, because of the busy schedule of a faculty member, it's impossible. And what else? The duration of an activity can be approximately.
In that case, Tomo, sorry to interrupt, but just to be clear, if it's not a case, then what do you shift to if you don't have a faculty member available? Like how do you change the day and the activities?
We have several options, including spontaneous consulting project or anything creative in terms of, for example, coming up a business plan as a team, and etc. We developed several options, and we are also reviewing such options sporadically. So it's a little difficult to define what exactly you should expect in assessment day without using a case. And regardless of the use of a case, I think the duration of an activity can be approximately 3 hours. Again, this includes small group discussions and big group discussion.
So can you take us, let's assume it's the case study. Can you take us through that kind of 3-hour period? My understanding is there's like various stages of, is it usually you put like teams together and then there's, team discussions? Can you enlighten our audience to that level of detail?
Sure. Let me start from confirming the timing you receive the case. It's going to be more or less 1 week before the official day of the assessment day. So you still have time to read and analyze the case. It's not like the very beginning of the assessment day for you to receive this case. It never happens. And then when it comes to the activities, in the main room, I don't know how many people you're going to find. It completely depends on the number of applications we receive, and etc. And sometimes it's a little too big, but it's not something we can control. But at the same time, by contrast, in a small group you're going to be a part of, I would say you can find, for example, 6 or 7 members more in addition to yourself. And then we make sure to have as much diversity as possible in each group, like a real one, which you can find in our classroom. So the idea behind this assessment day is also captured here. This is an opportunity for you to understand the dynamics of your day-to-day activities, especially in the first year in terms of teamwork and case-based classes. So this is a good chance for an applicant to understand the fit with IESE, because even if you get accepted to IESE, if you feel extremely uncomfortable with this experience during the assessment day, I don't know if you should join IESE, to be honest. So it's not just about the fit from the admissions committee side, but also from an applicant side, to make sure that both sides can feel some fit.
And dealing with the cases, so they're coming in expected to work as a team, and then you are going to have, so they're acting like as the protagonist in whatever story. I think you've said it's very often as a CEO or a CEO of company facing whatever situation. And eventually, am I correct that they end up in a real case discussion, and you often have like alumni or staff who are actually playing different roles that in the company, and then everyone is interacting from there?
Perhaps it's a little different. Let me clarify how it works in a little deeper level. In each small group, you're going to find one person from IESE, whether it's one of the admissions committee members, including me, or one of the alumni we also handpick for this activity. Basically, this person doesn't do anything except for giving general instruction about what you should do in this small group. But this is already something facilitator of this activity tries to cover in the main room. So basically, this person in a small group is just trying to understand the dynamics of the teamwork, or to be precise, evaluating each individual in this small group discussion. So this person has nothing to do with a protagonist of a specific case. And it's not like a role-playing game. Instead, it's completely up to applicants in the same team in terms of how a discussion is developed. Occasionally, a professor in the main room gives some detailed instructions, but it depends when it comes to the first instruction. Because I often have to be a facilitator of this activity in the main room, I completely understand that some professors prefer to give detailed instructions for the very first breakout room. This is not the case for some of the professors, and etc. So that's why I need to say it completely depends on each professor. And then, again, as I mentioned, how a conversation is developed in a given time is completely dependent on each team. And then they are supposed to be back after finishing this conversation to a main room to follow the discussion developed by the professor. And this can be repeated several times.
And that's really the stage that I was thinking of. So they've worked as a team to come up with their kind of point of view that they're going to try and present with all of the other teams, and the professor facilitating in this discussion. Is that correct, of the way it kind of takes place?
Yep.
Yeah, that's where I've heard from some others that maybe it's just sometimes that you have people playing some of those other roles. Or it probably depends on the content of the case as well, right?
Yeah.
So my understanding, and you can tell me if this is changed, is that you also have Open Day, which is an opportunity for visitors, right? Not maybe they haven't applied yet. And is it happening concurrently, and are they participating basically in the same day, or can you give us some information on that?
So this is all about in-person assessment day, because it has nothing to do with a virtual assessment day. And so whether you should join or whether you should join the in-person open day one day before the in-person assessment day, well, it happens one day before the assessment day. And then whether something is judged from such an activity one day before the assessment day is almost nothing, unless something is extreme, I would say. We don't have such bandwidth to judge people from open day. We make sure to engage applicants, to make sure to give concrete messages about what kind of program we offer and etc. We don't have such a bandwidth, and we are less incentivized to judge such applicants from such an extra activity at all. So you can be much more relaxed, and you can, well, instead regard this as part of the good practice for the assessment day, because such a open day in person may include a part about the case discussion as well.
That's, I think, really helpful for people to understand. I think everyone does worry how much, if at all, am I being evaluated just when I'm visiting, right? So I think that can make a lot of people really relax. So what kind of would be an example of a person, the way that they go through the discussion and behave in the case, like the main room? What are some examples of something you would evaluate positively versus in the end you would give a negative evaluation to the applicant?
I think it's also about the balance between quantity and the quality of comments. So, for example, for some people who are from some specific parts of the world, they're a little reserved. They tend to keep listening to the very end of a sentence, etc. If there's such a person, this person may find it difficult to jump into a fast-paced discussion, but such a person can think about something more in depth. If that's the case, the quality of comment made by such a person can be much more productive than some of the people who can spontaneously mention whatever they can come up with. So yes, it's too risky for an applicant to be completely quiet, but at the same time, we completely try to understand the differences of communication styles across so many different countries, like what I mentioned in one of the previous questions. And yes, we make sure to pay attention to the quality of such a comment as well.
Terrific. And how would you advise applicants to prepare for the assessment day?
I would say it would be great if an applicant can join one virtual open day before submitting an application. Perhaps the level of discussion can be a little different from the real one you may find in the assessment day, but this may make you understand what kind of situations you should expect in the assessment day. So this is something I can recommend to every applicant, no matter where this applicant is from. And the other thing is, it also depends on how much you're exposed to English conversations on a daily basis. But if you are not in such a circumstance, you can consider being exposed to such situations at least several times before joining the assessment day. For example, I'm thinking about a situation where you can find, let's say, 5 or 6 members who are not from your culture or countries. And then it doesn't have to be a discussion about something so professional. It can be something super casual, perhaps over alcohol or whatever. It could be definitely an option as well. what is the objective of such an idea is to make sure that you can feel comfortable with being exposed to such an environment. So it doesn't matter whether it's professional or personal. So I think these are the two things I can come up with as good preparations you can do even before submitting an application. Perhaps assuming that this is about using a case, I can add one more thing, and you can spend enough time in terms of your preparation by reading and analyzing a case. And one thing intriguing that you can also find in a real classroom at IESE is not so many people do numbers. So perhaps by doing numbers in terms of analysis, you can make a small difference.
Sounds like terrific advice. So why don't we move on now to how you evaluate applicants as far as the entire application. So I know you do a holistic evaluation. Could you give us an idea, a kind of rough explanation of how you weight the various components?
Yeah, it's a little difficult to quantify even internally. It also depends on so many situations. But let me start from something boring. It's because of a holistic approach. But at the same time, if I try to come up with some components that are a little more relevant than some others, they could be your professional and personal career. Second, why IESE from a broader perspective. Third, your communication skills. This may include a part associated with your language or English or not. And then the last part is the GMAT GRE. So I mentioned 4 pillars, but we also make sure to consider other components as well. But if I need to point out more relevant items, I can come up with these 4 pillars.
Okay, that's perfect.
And I would say they are more or less equally important.
More or less equally. Okay. And so can you give us a kind of feel for if we were in the room of a typical admissions committee meeting, what are the kinds of things that are happening? How are applicants being presented and discussed?
And let me start from explaining how many committees we try to have per round. And we try to have, I think, 5 committees per round in total, because we have Asia committee, MENA committee, Latin committee, India committee, and scholarship committee. And scholarship committee is an opportunity for everyone in this admissions committee to get together. And it implies, for example, I'm based in Tokyo, and I'm the deputy director of the Asia team. So I'm less incentivized to join the Latin Americas committee. So perhaps I mentioned Latin, but it also includes America, the US or North America. So it's all about the Americas. But at the same time, I occasionally interview someone from Brazil, the US, and etc. So it still depends. But I'm not as incentivized as Asia committee to join such a committee covering the other part of the world. But in the scholarship committee, every member in the admissions committee is supposed to join. And then we don't have a quotas per nationality, but the reason why we try to have different committees is to make sure to have rich diversity without having too many people from a too specific part of the world. That's the idea behind having 4 regional committees. And then in the last committee, the scholarship committee, we make sure to double check if everything in terms of diversity, which is about nationalities and professional backgrounds, gender, etc., are more or less balanced, in addition to any discussions about how to allocate our money for scholarship requests.
So when you are, what I'm also curious about is in an individual committee meeting, how is we have one applicant that you're now going to decide to put forward or not. What is that conversation like, and how is it kind of read to the group and debated, and how is the final decision then made?
It depends on the way of an expression of a regional director. For example, I'm trying to be as efficient as possible in my explanation. So for someone who is more or less very clear about a decision we can agree on, I try to make my explanation super concise. So perhaps a discussion about this less controversial applicant can be less than 1 minute. But this is not the case for someone who is much more controversial. Perhaps we may need to spend more than 7 minutes or 8 minutes, etc. So it completely depends. And how much time we need per applicant also depends so much on case. So there's no general answer, but just as a general statement, too long discussion makes us too tired. So we try to make ourselves as efficient as possible and effective as possible.
When you come down to it and you have two applicants who are virtually equal, how do you end up making that decision between them?
It depends on what kind of situation we are in. For example, if we have enough number of people from, again, we don't have a quota, but we don't try to be too extreme. That's why we try to set up a limit per nationality, for example. So if an applicant A comes from such a country, and then applicant B is from different parts of the world, and there's no constraint like that, we may prefer applicant B. And then in another case, perhaps we may the decisive factor between an applicant A and applicant B may have nothing to do with the candidacy of this applicant, because the assumption you proposed was the level of candidacy is equal between these two candidates. So if that's the case, perhaps the level of Y or yes love may matter a lot as a decisive factor. So it depends on situations, I'll say.
So someone in the room might be saying, I know candidate A has been interacted in an incredible amount with the school and knows our program deeply, so we're going to sway to that person.
Yeah, but just as a reminder, in line with what I mentioned in our previous conversation, the balance between the quantity and the quality should still matter. So we don't try to measure the amount of love just because of the quantity of interactions this person has had with us.
Excellent. All right. So with that, why don't we move on to, we've just got a little bit more we'll go through, which coming off of the decisions, of course, one of the decisions you can come to is to waitlist someone. And what do you recommend that applicants who've been waitlisted do and behave while they're on the list, hoping to get off of it and be admitted?
Yeah. I know how frustrating such a situation is for an applicant and how tricky it is, something perhaps less expected before submitting an application. We completely understand the stress of an applicant, but let me explain something a little more clearly than you may expect. And we don't give any feedback to such applicant who are on the waiting list about why they are waitlisted, unfortunately. So they may have to analyze why they are waitlisted. And also, being waitlisted implies an applicant is exposed to some uncertainty, which means this applicant destiny may depend on what's going to happen to other applicants, perhaps in the following round. And not everyone on the waiting list is in the same situation. For example, an applicant A can change their status with a small effort. This can be less applied to an applicant B. So it implies we have an order in this wait list. And the other thing is, well, again, in line with what I just mentioned, it also depends on what's going to happen in the following rounds, which is, even for us, unpredictable in terms of the number of applications we receive and how many of them are strong enough, etc. But at the same time, it would be appreciated if an applicant could give us any updates from time to time so that we can be aware that this applicant is still interested in being a part of the next cohort.
Terrific. I appreciate the advice. And moving on to just one kind of miscellaneous question that is a situation I see applicants face fairly frequently is they've applied to some schools in round one, and they've now maybe decided even they would prefer IESE. So they get admitted to a school in round one, and now the deposit deadline to keep that space is before the decision deadline for IESE. Do you have any, like, is it reasonable for them to ask you if there's any possibility of an early decision given that situation?
Yes, but at the same time, there is no guarantee that we can meet such a request, and you don't lose anything by reaching out to us with such a request. But on the flip side, it depends on each situation, but we may ask this applicant to reach out to another school to extend the payment deadline. And so in general, before finding such a situation, something recommended is to make sure to check all the timelines of all the institutions you apply to so that you won't be in such a complicated situation. But at the same time, even if you try to apply in the same round to all the institutions you're interested in, you might find such a situation. If that's the case, we try to see what we can do based on what I just mentioned. But well, there's no guarantee that we can meet your request, and it depends on so many things.
I wonder in that case, would that move the needle at all on your eventual decision? I mean, they're now saying to you, look, I've got an offer from, school A, but I want to go to IESE so badly. I'm trying to figure out, can I find out, yes, I'm in, and then I will pass on the other school. So even if you say no, and they still say, yes, I want to continue, or, I want to keep my application going, is it impressive to you? I mean, is it another data point that you will then include in the final decision saying, number one, they got an offer from another top school, and number two, they are so determined to get into our school that it's a huge positive?
I don't think it affects our final decision. I don't remember any cases that critically affected a decision or changed our tentative decision to a final one. That's why I mentioned you have nothing to lose.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much for going so long all together, and I hope that our audience appreciates the depth of insights you've been able to share, and that there's a lot of information that maybe they weren't able to find anywhere else, and it will help them with their applications, hopefully. So before we wrap up, is there anything that I didn't ask you about that you want to make sure we finish with?
Nothing special. I think we've covered so many topics across all the stages of the admissions process, but we haven't covered anything about career, the program, life in Barcelona. If an applicant who is listening to this is interested in such topics, please feel free to reach out to us. I wish you the best of luck with the next step of your professional journey, and sooner or later, do look forward to receiving your application as well.
That's terrific. And I will say on that note, with my previous interview with a current student, that's another great way to get some insight to the real experience, as you're saying. And I'll put a link to that in the comments or the description. So thank you everyone for watching, and hope to see you again next time. And thank you so much, Tomo. Really appreciate it.